Welcome to the Playground podcast. This episode is powered by Playdate, the app that helps you build your family's social circle. Today's guest is the fabulous Alana Galini.
Oh, so fabulous. Thank you.
Fabulous.
What an intro.
One hell of a mommy hustler.
Oh.
Mama of two boys. We're going to hear all about it today.
Great.
How's
I'm so
life?
excited. Thank you for having me.
Of course, I can't wait to hear. How's life with two boys? Two under three? So
one is 3.5 right now. One is 1.5. And it is sheer insanity. I mean, it's the greatest thing. I know everybody says that, but it is just a type of on that I've never known. And I'm an on person, but like, this is just
next level hustle.
Next level. And I mean, obviously I only grew up like with a sister, and like all my pets were female. Like I had no male energy in my life. My dad wasn't in the picture. And then like, so I was kind of just certain that when I had kids, like of course I'm going to have a girl. And so to then have like my sweet babies here on earth are boys, but like even my losses, they've all been boys. And so I'm just like surrounded with male energy. And I'm sure there are like challenging things about being a girl mom. Like I'm sure they have their like, oh my gosh.
Makeup. My makeup is constantly rated. It's awesome.
But like, this is just like, I feel like during the course of every minute of every day, they're trying to kill themselves. The physical nature of trying to keep up with them is so full on. It's so fun, but it's amazing. I mean, it's great.
It's amazing. You mentioned losses.
Yeah.
Losses, tell me about that.
Yeah, so I had, and as I've now learned, unfortunately, being part of that horrific group that nobody wants to be part of, the community of baby loss, it is, I've had a less than kind of smooth road to motherhood. So before both my sons, I had a loss, and actually my first pregnancy ever, I went in with the whole like blissful, naive, pregnancy journey that everybody should have. Like that's the way it should be. You see all of these like gorgeous, just gonna pop into my appointment, like great scan, everything goes swimmingly. And I feel like, so this was in 2019 and
just before COVID.
Right, yes, just before, and actually right before like our wedding. So
naughty.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say the loss was like right before. Yeah, our wedding. Well, it was my husband and I, like we got married slightly later, like in life, and I think we both kind of knew we want kids, and you hear, it can like take a while and everything else. So it was actually like super cheesy, like went to the Maldives, he proposed, and we're like, well, listen, like we know we eventually want to have kids, so it's probably going to take a while. We'll just, we'll just see like what happens. And boom, apparently like on the engagement trip, it happened. But then, so everything had like gone swimmingly for the first and most of the second trimester, like taking the NIPT test, everything was fine. All of my scans, like straight away. And then at the 20-week scan, got some pretty devastating news.
20 weeks. Wow. That's halfway through.
Yeah. And so we were supposed to be married 10 days later. Like I had my wedding dress was like fit for a 5-month bump. And long and the short of it, I mean, he had several critical congenital diagnoses, like half of his heart basically hadn't formed. There was transposition of the greater arteries, and which like we crossed actually one of the pediatric like specialists in like diagnosing prenatally is in Italy, which is where we were getting married, and like planes, trains, and automobiles like got to his clinic for like a second opinion and everything. And long and the short of it, he's like, even if he makes it to like full term, it's gonna suffocate trying to get his first breath. And it was just the most like, call it a choice, but like you're given a choice between horrific and terrible. And it's just,
how do you make that call?
Yeah, I mean, and for me, it was just like the only humane, like I didn't want him to suffer any more than, it already had. And, it was having, like just seeing all of my friends and my sister's a mom of 4 and like all these beautiful, healthy, gorgeous babies, you just kind of like, you assume that that's the way it's going to be. You never realize something could possibly go wrong. And especially like that kind of late term. And so that having been my only reference of pregnancy, to then have to, go in and your body go into labor for the first time and birth a baby that is not going to be alive, was, I mean, yeah, just one of the most indescribable, talk about like a surreal, I really felt like when that was all ongoing from the moment like we got the diagnosis to when I then, held him like in my arms, you don't really feel like you're living it, like you're watching it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, I think what that experience taught me, and I never tried to undermine it. I never tried to look for the silver linings, or because I believe in these like experiences of baby loss, even if you're the most like empathetic soul in the world, unless you've ever walked that road, you'll never be able to really feel like all of the emotions, all of the feelings like that are just coursing through your veins. So I never undermine it. I never say, oh God, I mean, some of the worst things you've ever heard. Oh, at least you can get pregnant.
Oh my God. Or, like someone said that to you?
Oh, I mean, but I feel, with miscarriage being as common as it is, 1 in 4, this is something that people say to my friends who've had miscarriages all the time. At least you can get pregnant. At least you can get pregnant, which just completely like invalidates the experience, one of the most traumatic experiences a human can have. You know what I mean? And so,
how did you deal with that? How do you deal with something 20 weeks in? That's crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was definitely, you go through the whole, myriad of emotions and things this is actually what prompted me to like start my Instagram channel, Humaning, was to just really, because at that time, I will never forget, like the day before I was due to be induced and to go into labor with him, my sister, who was half a world away in the States, and she was getting ready to fly over to Italy to meet us for the wedding. Like she and I are on WhatsApp the entire time and on FaceTime, and we are both like scouring the internet. And again, this is 2019. Like this isn't 2010. And like I was looking for any story, like any other woman who had gone through something similar. It didn't have to be the same diagnosis, but like knowing you have a child who, as the doctors have told you, what they have makes them incompatible with life, and you're getting ready to, your body's gonna go into labor for the first time, you're gonna give birth, like what do I expect? And we could find painfully little. And it was just like serendipity. A good friend of mine happened to give me a call, who was trying to make it to the wedding. Long story short, she couldn't, and that's why she was calling me, and I was actually like in the hospital at the time. And she was like, Alana, like, how are you? And I was like, yeah, not great, actually. And I told her what was going on. And she was like, oh my gosh. And she's one of the most like pragmatic, clear, just beautiful, direct people. And she was like, I knew she had a late term miscarriage is what I had thought. Because this is such a taboo topic.
Nobody talks about it.
And it's like, which makes it like horrifically more painful, because you are going through something that again is one of the most isolating experiences. And then we're meant to feel like shame or taboo around it. And so she had never shared, that basically a similar thing had happened. They found out very late that her child was incompatible with life, and they went through the same situation that we did. But I thought she had a late term miscarriage. And she was like, so we had the same thing, and do you want me to tell you what to like expect? And as awful and horrific as it was to hear, like what she had gone through and what I was imminently getting ready to go through in the next 36 hours, just having that knowledge, right? Because one of the scariest things is the unknown.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times the worry and the anxiety about like what is getting ready to happen can be almost equally more like traumatizing than, the trauma that's impending. And so having her just like give me the knowledge of like what was going to happen somehow created, I don't want to say like a sense of peace, but just a knowing, right? Which brings you some like surrender. And so like I vowed from that, when I hung up the phone with her, like I was like, when I can ever gather myself, all my pieces again, like I want to be very, very, very open about like pregnancy loss, about like termination of children whose, diagnoses are incompatible with life. I don't want another Alana in 1 month, in a year, in 5 years to be tirelessly looking over the internet for a similar story and find nothing. And so like that's why I ended up like starting Humaning, because another thing that was so shocking to me is that even in times of like insane grief and insane sorrow and insane trauma of like the mental, the physical, the emotional variety, there is still like, there were glimpses, right, of like beauty and joy. And, you know, I'll never forget like the morning after, I'm like sitting there in the bed, just my like deflated 5-month stomach, and my husband, so we were in Italy, like I said, in a hospital. And, you know, also this whole experience, I'm surrounded with people who are speaking Italian, which like I kind of understand, but again, just not even be able to like, you know, fully understand what it was just really challenging. But I remember like laughing then that morning because they brought in like a little tray of, you know, breakfast, and it was like an actually delicious piece of focaccia and cappuccino. And I was like, imagine the like crap you get in an American hospital. And like, at least in Italy, I get a good, you know, cup of coffee in the hospital. And at first, like when I laughed, my first reaction was like embarrassment and anger. Like, how can I be laughing? Like, I just held my dead child in my arms.
Wow.
You know, but then, and I realized that, again, in that moment, like that is to be human. That is life, is to be able to hold two seemingly totally polar opposite feelings or emotions, experience in like this creative balance, and not negating one or the other. And you know, and I had to, that was kind of like this mantra that then served me all the way throughout like my pregnancies after loss, you know, because I never got to go in again. Like even when I was, you know, pregnant with my 2 healthy babies, I never got to have that like naive, blissful experience.
Because you were constantly anxious.
Yeah,
obviously.
Exactly.
So then, okay, did you still get married 10 days later?
It's a great question. So from the moment like we got the diagnosis, because my husband had, the 20-week appointment was here in Dubai, and it was the first scan that I had gone to without my husband. So it was the first one that I was alone at.
Oh, God.
But he had flown to the States. He was picking up my, at that time, 93-year-old or 92-year-old grandma, to bring her to the wedding. So he was being a good guy. He wasn't just like missing out on the appointment. And I was due to fly out the next morning. And, you know, so then I like called my best friend when I was like sitting in the parking lot, just disintegrating after the news I had just gotten. And I remember like from that point, I said like, there's no way, I couldn't imagine celebrating anything, much less a wedding, you know what I mean, in 10 days. And so I was like, I can't do it. Like, I can't do it. But it was, you know, a destination wedding. It was going to be super small. There was like 37 people. And ultimately, after my husband and I had like spoken about it, I realized like we were going to be in like the absolute like pits of grief and of despair and of, you know, this horrific experience, whether we were alone or whether we were with 37 of our closest friends and family. And because it was like small and because it was like very chill, it was like eating great Italian food and like, you know, dancing, we ultimately decided to do it, and we were able to like tell everybody ahead of time. And I still was like unsure if it was the right thing to do, because I knew, like, you know, I was, even though I didn't walk out of the hospital with a baby, I was still postpartum.
Yeah, of course.
I was bleeding. I was wearing giant like maternity pads. I had a very ill-fitting dress, you know, and I felt terrible. My milk came in.
Yeah,
like,
of course.
It was a type of insanity, like where everything is reminding you that you should be holding a baby and you're not.
I can't even imagine, like, the milk part as well.
I won't like ever forget. Like, I remember I woke up in the morning and I think I had been like face like on the side or like facing down, and there was like a wet spot like on the bed, and I was like, what is that? And then I looked down and I had like wet spot on my shirt, and I just immediately started like the floodgates, you know, because
you've never been a mom before,
no,
right? So you had no idea what the hell's
exactly. And I thought like it was next level. But then when we actually like, when I walked down the aisle and like I saw my husband, you know, and I realized like, okay, marriage is easy when like life goes swimmingly. Marriage is easy when like everything is great and everything is roses. I think the real point of finding the right partner is the person that you can head on face really, really challenging storms that you never even imagine you would sail into. Yeah. And so I realized like, my God, if there was ever a celebration of like what partnership means, Like, you don't get much harder than this.
Yeah.
So it ended up being like very, very meaningful. So yes, we had the wedding.
Good.
Later on.
So then you come back to Dubai.
Yeah.
And it's COVID or not yet?
No, it's 2019.
Okay.
It's 2019. And so, yeah, we fell pregnant with Raf.
You just wanted to go for it again?
No. And that's actually a really interesting point, too. And again, you have so many competing thoughts and like crazy thoughts. Like, I never wanted, obviously, any woman in the world to experience what I had just experienced. And at the same time, I remember walking around Golden Mile, like, and every single pregnant person I saw, I was just like,
oh my God.
Like, which is so, but they're nonsensical. Of course it passed like within days, but you just think, why me? Why me? Like, why,
Golden Mile is the worst. It's literally like a kindergarten.
It's like pregnant. Totally. So talking about those like competing emotions, when I like lost Grove, I, at the same time, like never wanted to be pregnant ever again. And for multiple reasons. I never wanted to myself feel what I had just felt, like in every sense of the word. But I also felt this like immense, like guilt towards my son, because I felt like any baby that I had afterwards, I don't want him to think I'm replacing him or that I forgot about him.
Yeah.
And then also at the same time, I was like, all you want to do is feel another baby inside you. You know what I mean? Thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really just like, it is the epitome of like every mixed emotion coming from every single corner of your dark brain. You know what I mean? But we ended up, so it took I didn't rush it. I didn't make a plan of like, this is when we're going to do it. I just kind of like let nature take its course. Let like all the emotions take their course with me. I like joined, I became like, again, pretty kind of purposeful with making sure I attended to my grief, like seeing a grief counselor, like going to like groups of other women who had like, had pregnancy loss. And we ended up getting pregnant with Ralph like a couple months later. And he was born almost a year and a month to the day of my first.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and it was the most like, gosh, like even when I held him in my arms, you like still feel those like tremors, those aftershocks of like your previous birth experiences, because even though he was safe in my arms, I almost like couldn't believe it. I was like, but what is going to happen now?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. But you must have had such a scary pregnancy. You're probably like walking around like.
Oh my gosh! Every single time you go to the bathroom, I'm like, is there going to be blood? You're just every single scan. I will never I had never had a panic attack in my life. Like I know a lot of people suffer from that. I'd never experienced a panic attack, and I was driving to my 20-week scan with Raf, like down Sheikh Zayed Road. I remember like when I pulled off to the exit to the hospital, and as soon as I was pulling into, and I was like, I was very, very aware. So I remember like when I was driving on Sheikh Zayed Road, I like started to feel like kind of heart palpitations and like I felt uneasy, and I decided like, let the feelings in, like acknowledge what I was feeling, like take deep breath, da 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 da. So I thought I had like addressed it and managed it. And then when I pulled into the parking space that was in the same clinic, as I had gotten the 20 exam before, I started like full on like hyperventilating, struggling like to breathe. And yeah, you're just, through the whole like scan, I'm just on pins and needles. And I actually just had, we're pregnant with
Wait, you're pregnant?
Number 3
wow.
at the moment, which is so crazy.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I just had my 12-week scan, which is not like, even at the 12-week scan with my first, everything looked fine, but I just had my 12-week scan with this little babe, and still like you're just sitting there the entire time like, what are they going to say? What are they going to say? Because even in that first, and I was oh my gosh, I'll never forget that. Like because Florian wasn't here for that
You
first
were
scan.
recording the
So I was
scan.
recording the scan. And for 20 minutes, because the 20-week scan is the long one where they're looking at like every single part to make sure everything is great. And for the whole 20 minutes, it's like what you see in movies. The doctor's joking. He's like, oh, this one's going to be a football player because he's kicking and moving and da-da-da-da-da.
And then his face changes.
And then there was like 20 minutes in, I remember him looking, and there was like silence for a long time. And I hadn't really, again, because your brain just doesn't go there, right? Because this is not natural. It may be like, it may have happened to people, but it's not natural. So even though he'd been silent, I was just like, oh, he's looking like closely at something. It never went to like something is wrong. And then I will never forget, like I was telling this to somebody yesterday, I can still hear his voice, like the intonation, the way, he's like, there's something wrong with the baby's heart. And I remember like exactly the way his voice sounded. And then I was like still, I think just out of like robot, I was like recording, but not really like there. And it took me like over a year to like watch that video again. The anxiety and like in terms of like pregnancy after loss is like definitely, but I also like, I'm a person who's like I truly feel like the mind-body connection, and I try to like not let anxiety take over me because I don't want it to affect the baby, yada, 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 yada. So like I really tried as much as possible to like not push down those feelings, but like feel them, like let them move on. And it was a big reason that actually pushed me to get a doula as well, which was like one of the best decisions. Oh my gosh, if anybody is pregnant, you got to get a doula. Like it is the best thing, I think, for a positive birth.
Who's your doula? Let's recommend her.
Oh my God, Lala. She's the greatest. Lala is an angel who like walks among us. She's incredible. She actually does a ton for the loss, like the baby loss community out here. Just incredible. But one of my biggest fears in my subsequent pregnancy, because I felt like I had done a lot like mentally, and I had like done hypnobirthing in terms of like, okay, the physical, I felt like I wanted to be as in control of my own birth experience as I could, but I was afraid that when the inevitable would happen, because one of the most like poignant, visceral memories that I have, and I had like recurring nightmares of it for months after Grove, was when my water broke with the son I lost. Because even though I knew what was happening, even though I was like in this, I was aware, something about like when a physical sensation happens in your body and you're like, oh my God, this is like I'm getting ready to birth my unalive baby.
Yeah.
And I was then afraid that like no matter all the work that I would do on myself in the subsequent pregnancies to try and get ready for positive birth experience, I was afraid of like when a physical sensation, like the breaking of the water, it would just trigger everything. And the last thing you want to, do in labor is be stressed and be anxious. And so she and I worked so much on like grounding techniques and like, making sure we knew this was like a different experience. And so it was just invaluable, like her support.
So one loss.
So then I had Raf, and then I was like still nursing him. I hadn't even gotten my cycle back, so I wasn't even, the whole idea was like, oh, if you're breastfeeding, you can't get pregnant. So I wasn't even thinking about it, and all of a sudden, like I said, I hadn't even gotten my like period back, so I just didn't think there was any chance that we would be getting pregnant. And then I was like surprise pregnant after, I think Raf was 7 months. And so I was like, whoa, okay. But it was actually, it was kind of like a happy accident. My sister and I are 16 months apart. So I was like, oh, this is going to be great. They're going to be like super close. But I ended up having a missed miscarriage, which I had never heard about.
What's that?
So basically, I feel like a lot of the miscarriages that, at least the miscarriage that I had always thought and I had always heard about is like, you start bleeding and, your body is naturally like expelling a non-viable pregnancy. But a missed miscarriage, as I walked into the doctor's office, I think for my 8-week, but I was actually like 9 weeks or something, but like my 8-week appointment, and the baby didn't have a heartbeat. But a missed miscarriage is kind of when your body doesn't realize that you're not pregnant anymore. So you're still having all the same pregnancy symptoms, like your belly's still growing. I know. And you're
nauseous and you're
all of it. I still had like the breast tenderness, just everything. And that, for some reason, because I thought after what I experienced with Grove, and I'm never one to compare, like I believe loss is a loss, is a loss, is a loss. And like, because it's not, you're not mourning. I hate it when people are like, constantly on Instagram, I get messages of folks being like, thank you so much for sharing like this story. It makes me feel less alone. Like mine wasn't as bad as yours. I had a miscarriage at 6 weeks. And I say, you cannot write that, because you're not mourning the 6 or the 7 or the 9 or the 12 weeks that you were pregnant. You are mourning the like future that you were planned the moment you see those 2 lines on a stick. Do you know what I mean? And so so at 9 weeks when I had this miscarriage, but still in my head, I thought, but nothing could possibly be worse than what I've gone through with Grove. And while, again, I wasn't comparing, it was way more challenging than I thought it was going to be. Because as much as you know it's not logical, I start to get like so angry at my body. I'm like, what is, you can't even recognize that like you're like the baby's not alive in you, and you got to keep on like getting bigger, and you can keep, and now I have to go in and I have to get, you have to get a D&C, because if your body is not like expelling it, you have to go in. And I had like never been under before, like general, and it just felt this very invasive, this something happening to you, which is how I felt also with Grove, where instead, like for me, like birth is just the most like empowered, I think one of the most empowering experiences that as women, like this is why I'm like so passionate about birth and women really getting like educated and empowered and supported, because this is something that we do. The idea of like doctors delivering baby, like no, okay, they're there to support and everything, but like you are this amazing facilitator of like life. And instead, like going in to get this D&C and what had happened with Grove, it just felt like
you're going through it all over again.
Yeah, so it was just, it was full on. It was full on. But then Constantine came again almost another year later. Oh my, he's such a little pout. Oh my gosh, I love him to bits. But he is you had your second child 5 months ago.
Yes.
Are they just a different breed?
They're very different. I worry about them growing up and watching this, so I'm not going to.
Good for you, because I tell everything about them.
Look, they're very different. My first was much harder.
Oh, yeah. Really? Oh.
My second's a lot more chilled out
so
far.
Gosh.
You're the opposite?
Massively. When we had Raph, it's so funny. He was like, he would never smile like a ton, but he also didn't like cry. Like he never slept. I don't make sleepers, unfortunately. They all
maybe your next one will sleep.
Oh God, that's all. When I was like, people are like, do you want a boy or do you want a girl? I was like, I want one that sleeps.
Can I ask you a question? Hold on, just off track. Do you believe in sleep training, or do you just believe that babies are born and they can sleep or not? So we're going to piss off a lot of people with
I know. This is a very polarizing topic. Oh my gosh. I very much have always been of the notion that I felt like I never had unrealistic expectations of sleep. Like I know that newborn sleep and infant sleep is a very non-linear like journey. And I felt like I was very much the like responsive, go back to caveman days. If they're crying, like I need to be there, I need to help them. Like that's our role. And so I felt like I was much more like absolute no sleep training for us. And then it like got to, I was, I think 6 months pregnant with Teeny, and Raph was still waking like 6 times a night. And so I tried to like explore at that time, quote unquote, like more gentle, like sleep training. It wasn't until with Constantine that I found an amazing gal. Oh my gosh, Diane, the Dream Fairy. I don't know if you know her on Instagram. And so because Teeny was even worse than Raph. And again, this is coming from somebody who has like no expectations when it comes to like sleep.
Oh my God. By the way, sleep is a deal. This is why and I think I only got pregnant with my second when I first started sleeping at 2 years old.
For sure.
Because you forget.
No, oh my gosh. You forget. Exactly. And the moment that they do, you're like, okay, wait, I can do this for sure. And then you're like, I'm in it again.
Very true. Well, on that note, thank you so much, Alana.
Thank you for having me. This was so great.
Thank you for sharing your amazing story with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with all the mamas and dadas that you know, guys. See you soon.
Bye. Woo!